We'll get started right now at the top of the hour. I just wanted to go ahead and welcome everyone as you are still coming in. As people are loading, at least on my screen. So I thought I can do my little song. I'm really excited that a lot of you are joining us today at the 6 questions in 6 minutes-ish Government Historians Edition. And this is a fun event sponsored by the National Council on Public History Committee for Government Historians. And it's part of a bigger YouTube series asking questions from different public historians throughout the United States and Canada. I've already participated and rambled on about myself for more like 11 minutes than 6 minutes, but that's okay. So today we are going to be talking to, at first, members of our committee. So hopefully all of you here can learn a little bit about what a historian in the government does. We also have members joining us from the Society for Historians in Federal Government. So I wanted to just highlight these 2 organizations. If you are interested in potentially participating in the NCPH Government Historians Committee, make sure to join us at our next meeting in April. It'll be part of the NCPH list of all the committee meetings. You can come and see what we do. You can also drop a comment of your name and contact information in the chat, and we can pass that information on that you're interested in participating in the committee, where we're really just telling the stories about how us historians in the government do our work and kind of deal with common problems and issues. We have a lot of sessions sponsored during this conference over the next few weeks, so make sure to check those out too and join us at those conferences. I also wanted to let you know that this session is going to be recorded, and we hope that you participate as well. So I am going to turn it over to our host.
Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you so much. As mentioned, I'm Jean-Pierre Morin, and before I go any further and say anything else, I am going to kindly ask absolutely everybody to please mute your microphones. Every time any sound comes through, it reverberates throughout the entire system, so we will kindly ask you to please turn off your mics. Ooh, silence has now returned. Not so bad. However, I have not come back to the center of the screen. So just to come back to this, I'm Jean-Pierre Morin. I'm the departmental historian for the Canadian Federal Department of Crown Indigenous Relations and Northern Affairs, Canada. I am also a member of the Government Historians Committee. In fact, I've been a member of a committee since it first started. And today during the session, we're actually going to go through, well, basically, to give you a bit of context, when lockdown started, I decided that I felt a little cut off from my fellow public historians, and I started a YouTube series called 6 Questions in 6 Minutes-ish. The ish part has to do with the fact that most of us aren't really able to answer anything in less than 6 minutes, so I figured that the ish part kind of covers any time we may go over. The YouTube series is up, and in fact, this session today is being recorded, and we will be adding it to the session, to that link there through either linking it from the NCPH YouTube page to my own, or vice versa, whichever way, but we'll get out there one way or another. The session today, we're going to start off with 3 of the members of the Government Historians Committee. Jesse Kratz, Matthias Saunders, and Jim Bartolini, and we will go ask them their 3 questions, and then we will jump into it. And we're actually going to open it up to you. We want you to actually tell us who you are. The questions are extremely simple. None of them are life-shattering. None of them delve too deep into your own psyche, but nonetheless, they're interesting questions to tell us a little bit about who you are and why you're here participating at NCPH and why you've come to listen to the government historians tell us a little bit about themselves. We will ask you to please use, if you do want to participate, we'll ask you to please use it in one of the two chats, either the Zoom chat or the Feedloot chat. And then we have people who are monitoring it, and they will actually tell you one way or another if that's actually going to be, if you want to participate in that. Okay, so getting started, before I just ramble on for far too long, because I really do. I'm going to turn it to the coach. We're going to go to the co-chair of the Government Historians Committee, Jessie Kratz, and we're going to ask her some very, very pointed questions. The most difficult of which is, Jessie, who are you?
Very difficult question. My name is Jessie Kratz, and I am the historian of the National Archives. I work in the main building in Washington, D.C., but for this last year, I've been working in my house on Capitol Hill, and you might see a glimpse of one of my cats today. Hopefully not, though.
Well, you know, NCPH cats are apparently.
Here's one. Say hi.
There you go.
Okay.
Good start. That's a good start. All right. So, how did you end up where you are?
Okay. Well, I think my origins for the National Archive have to be when I was an undergraduate. I was getting my degree in Iowa, and I did an internship at the Herbert Hoover Library in West Branch, which is about 45 minutes from my hometown. And this was really like the first introduction to the National Archives. And then when I moved to DC for graduate school, I was working on the Hill. I really disliked my job. It was like hyper political. It was during the Clinton impeachment. And so it was just, I thought the country was really divided then, obviously, little did I know. And I was living in College Park. So I applied for a student job at the National Archives at College Park, which a lot of people know as Archives 2. And I got the job there. And one of the main reasons I got that job is because I had that experience at the Hoover Library. And so I worked in researcher orientation, and I managed the archive's main email account. And I really got to know a lot about the agency, and I made a ton of contacts. And so after about a year, I was finishing up my master's degree, and there was a job opening in the Center for Legislative Archives. And that's the part of the National Archives that holds the official records of Congress. And so when my name came up on the cert, the director then, he knew me and he hired me. And so I worked there for 13 years, and I worked on outreach and exhibits. And I got to work with probably some of the most intrinsically valuable records in the National Archives. I think I've probably held documents sent to Congress signed by each president, except for this last one. I was gone by then. But in 2013, the historian job opened, and this was the very first agency historian. And all my experience at the archives, my publications, and my research skills put me in a really good position for the job, and they hired me, and I've been in that position ever since.
That's quite the directory. So can you tell us a little bit about the nature of your work, the kind of things that you do from day to day to overarching kind of idea?
Sure. Well, I'm really a one-woman shop. I am the only historian at the agency, so I do a bit of everything. So I think of my audiences as having 3 different audiences. And so one of them is like internally, so archive staff. And so I do things like new hire orientations. I do talks for staff. I answer a ton of research requests from staff. I write internal agency histories, and I work on a lot of records management issues for our records that go to the National Archives. I also run the agency's oral history program. So anyone familiar with oral histories know how much that work that is. I put up transcriptions of history office interviews online, which I do myself. I actually have to update the website myself. And then for the public, I do reference requests, I write articles, and I manage the NARA blog, Pieces of History. So shameless plug, I encourage everyone to check it out. Google National Archives Pieces of History and follow that blog. And then I also have ties with the academic world. I serve as a liaison to history organizations. I speak at conferences, and I give lectures to like undergraduate and graduate students on the history and importance of the agency. So there's a little bit of everything, and no day is the same as the next.
That's an extremely diverse catalog of. You have enough work to keep you busy for a very, very long time there, by the sounds of it.
I do.
So what do you enjoy most about this work?
Well, I think I really like to help people. So I guess if I could say I like helping people is the most fulfilling aspect of my job. Whether I guess I get to help people when they're researching their dissertations or writing books. or just like helping them find like a photo or track down a document. And so part of it is being the expert. I guess I'm the expert on National Archives history, and I kind of love being the expert. When I first started, I knew a lot about our agency, but I didn't know a lot about our history. And so over the past, I guess I've been there, in this job 8 years. I've learned a lot about the history, that it's really easy for me to answer people's questions now. But when I don't know something, it's always fun, kind of a fun adventure to kind of find the answer for the person. So I guess I would say just helping people is probably my most enjoyable part of my work.
Good. So what do you find what's the most challenging aspect of your work?
Well, I guess as you mentioned, I have a lot of responsibilities, a lot on my plate for one person. And so I'm constantly struggling to keep up. And so I have one of those jobs that never ends. I could work 24 hours a day and I'll never finish. So I do get detailed staff and some cross-training staff, but I think it'd be really helpful to have another person on staff. I could get so much more done with just one extra person. But I think I'm incredibly lucky. I do have a great boss. She's super supportive, and I have really great coworkers that help me in countless ways. So I can't complain about that.
All right, so here's the last question. What's that thing that's keeping you motivated with this extremely large volume of work that you have ahead of you?
Oh, well, I guess, I don't know. I really love learning about history, and there's no better place to learn about history than at the National Archives. I think we have records probably touching on every single subject in American history. And I think I really do learn something new every single day. And I work with really amazing people, so working can actually be fun. I don't dread coming to work every day. And in fact, I think sometimes something really exciting is going on. I actually look forward to it. Hate to say that. But it's really easy to be motivated when you really like what you do and you work with good people.
So if people want to find more information, this is not part of the 6 questions. This is
okay.
Jean-Pierre's additional question. If people wanted to find more information about the work that you do, where's the best place they should go?
Well, I have a website. It's I can't tell you all. It's kind of buried deep within the National Archives website. But if you go and Google National Archives History Office, you should be able to find my website, where I put a lot of what we do, the oral histories, the sources that I've compiled, and I have contact information. So that's probably where you can learn more about it. But also follow the blog, Pieces of History. I do write about agency history sometimes on that blog.
Oh, the world needs more administrative histories.
Right.
For those people who don't get it, go watch my own 6 questions in 6 minutes segment, where I go on and on and on about administrative history, because they're important. But anyways, thanks, Jesse. Thanks for giving us that insight into your little snippet of the public history world and the government world.
Great. And I hope I kept it to 6 minutes. I don't know. I didn't time myself.
Neither did I. I've lost track.
Right.
Next up, we have Matea Saunders. I know she's there because she was there because I saw her and then she disappeared. There she is.
I'm here.
Hi, Matea.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. All right. Are you ready for the first question? As you
am.
saw, it's a doozy. It's hard. It's a hard one. Who are you?
My name is Matea Sanders. I am the 316th Wing Historian at Joint Base Andrews with the United States Air Force and the Air Force History and Museum Program.
All right. So that's pretty unique. How did you end up there?
So really long story. So I have basically had every hiring authority to get into the federal government. So my first job with the federal government, I was actually a national park ranger. My Park Service hat actually sits like right behind me in my office. And I did that all through college and realized that I loved federal history, that I wanted to do something with the federal government in history. I didn't really know what. And so I went on and came and moved here to Washington, D.C. and got my master's at American. And while was fortunate through that to get to intern kind of across the government. So I worked at the Smithsonian. I worked in public policy for the National Endowment for the Humanities. I worked with Jesse at the National Archives doing social media, and also fell in love with the organization that is the Society for History in the Federal Government, and realized I wanted to be a federal historian. So I went on and did my PhD work at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and had to move overseas and actually worked for the Department of the Army, not doing history. I actually have called it like my dark year because it was my year that I didn't get to do history and missed it a lot. Little did I know I learned so much from that experience working for the Army and sort of seeing the administrative side and getting that experience. But through that, came to find out about Department of Defense historians and that as a defense historian, you get to kind of do everything, that you get to write command histories, which are second best to administrative histories, that you get to do archives, and that you get to do exhibits. And so when I came back from Europe, I started looking for jobs and basically took the first job that I could get. And I took a term position with the National Park Service, working at the American Battlefield Protection Program, doing grant work, and really liked that experience, and now can write grants really well, which is a great public history tool and a skill to have, but realized that's not where my long-term goal was. So I applied to this job with the US Air Force, and this was my first permanent job with the government. So that's kind of how I've been in this position about 2 years.
All right. So what kind of work are you actually doing? What's the nature of that day-to-day activity?
Yeah, so my job is kind of in 5 categories. So the first one is, the most important, is I write a command history, which is a history of everything that's happened in a unit in a particular year. I'm super lucky that my unit is super interesting. So the 316th is made up of everything to administer a base. So think it's a small city. So think engineering, think logistics. So they do planes and buses and getting people to where they're supposed to be. It also includes helicopters. So in my job, I've actually gotten to fly in a UH-1N Huey 2 times, which has been really, really cool. We also have a medical group, so that's played a huge role with COVID. And then we also have security forces who protect the base. So I write everything that they do. I was just this afternoon I was working on my history and was writing about some of the base events that we had last year, that we had drive-in movies and that kind of thing because of COVID. And I also do a ton of oral history as a result of that. Last year, I conducted about 35 oral histories in a year of everything that's happened. The next thing I do is I just act as a consultant for the unit. So that the idea of that command history is that it's supposed to be able to be utilized by a unit for the future policy making. So my commander will say, hey, I'm looking to make a decision. What did this look like 5 years ago? And so I'll type up my analysis and send that to him, using the archive that's created through all of this history writing. I also do outreach. So just this morning, I gave a brief to my commander about the history of women on Andrews. Last week, it was about some humanitarian work that was done by my unit in the 1960s and 1970s because of the humanitarian work that we're doing now. I give tours of the base and just do general base engagement. The next thing I do is I do heritage displays. So I actually do exhibits, but rather than being for the public, they're for my unit. I always say my public is my unit and the personnel who work them. And rather than going to a museum, I actually put exhibits up in the places that they work every day so that they're reminded of where they've come from, who's been there before, and so that that history is embodied in everything that they do. And then the last thing is emblems and heraldry. So this is probably the strangest part of my job, is that I'm responsible for all of the emblems that the base has, and they actually wear them on their uniforms, on their arm, and I'm responsible for helping them to create those emblems, and then I keep records of all of them for the unit. So those are kind of the big aspects of my job.
Just like Jesse, that's like so diverse and so many different things. And I think that really touches on one of the nature of the work of government historians. We do a lot of stuff. It's so diverse in how many things we do. So of that big, huge pile of stuff, what is it that you enjoy the most about it?
Yeah, so my absolute favorite, like the best day, is when I have convinced someone to give me something and then the next day I'm able to give them something, or if it's the opposite. So say it's, okay, so we put on the inauguration. That's a huge part of my unit. And so in November, I sent them a huge stack of papers that were like, okay, this is how we put on the inauguration in the last time that we did it. And then literally like 3 weeks ago, I got a huge thing from the inauguration this year. And they said, we want this to be there for the next time we put on the inauguration. We want them to have the documents that we had. And that for me is the best. Like I can go home and sleep because what the goal of my history office has been realized.
Wow, that's pretty cool, especially to know how the inner secrets of how the inaugurations went.
It was pretty interesting. It was quite neat.
I'm sure it was. So what are the biggest challenges that you actually faced in all of this?
Oh, so definitely I like Jesse, I'm a one deep position. It's just me. And one thing in the last year is that my job has really expanded because I've argued for it to expand. I've done here in Air Force history, we call it operationalizing your office. So I'm involved in every single time there's a like synopsis of like, this is how the event happened. I'm there. I'm there for the planning. And so it just can be like too much. Like there's just too much happening and I'm only one person. And so I think while it's good that I've argued for the office, I think it's also shown I was able to successfully hire a deputy historian, which is not really done for unit historians. So yeah, I think just not enough hours in the day to do everything.
Wow. So what, I think you sort of touched on this here, but what actually keeps you motivated to do this massive volume of work?
Yeah, I think just when I see, one thing that I love about working for the Department of Defense that just is always so exciting is just how they see history and they see how history can be impactful. And so when I see someone who comes and asks me questions about like, okay, what happened in this particular year? I'd like to use this. I'd like to use this in my promotion ceremony, or I would just like to give a brief to my unit, or I want to put up a new display. Being able to have that one-on-one engagement that's inspired by the other work that I do with the airmen and being out is really what motivates me. I love like I said, my public is my unit. And so I love being out there, like on the flight line, seeing the helicopters come in, and talking to the people. That's really, really what motivates me.
That's pretty amazing. And my additional question is off the side, how do you feel about the fact that the history work that you're doing is for a relatively small audience? Do you feel that others could benefit from this history as well, or you're very focused on it's just for the internal audience?
Yeah, so that's really interesting, and that was something that was a huge change going from like the National Park Service, where my last job was, to this, is because my public shrunk like to 2,000 people and 10,000 if you count like the base personnel. I do think that there's ways that it could be more broadened. And one thing that there are entities within the Air Force History and Museum program that do more of that work. So the National Museum, Wright-Patt Air Force Base, they do more of that. So I do think there's parts of it. And one thing I have tried is to try to broaden to more base personnel. And I think that in my work to try to help the unit to tell, one thing we've been working on is telling the story of Joint Base Andrews I think you could have a help of having like telling the broader story of the U.S. Air Force, and historians can be part of that.
Excellent. Nathia, thank you so much for taking part. Thanks. It's great seeing you because I haven't actually had a chance to chat with you in like 5 years. It's been forever.
Good to see you too.
All right, next up, we have another member of the Government Historians Committee, Jim Bertolini. You're in there somewhere. Turn on your camera so we can see you.
Yes, I'm here.
There you are. Thank you so much for participating. First question, who are you?
After a year in lockdown, I'm not really sure anymore. But so my name is Jim Bertolini. I'm a historic preservation planner with the city of Fort Collins, Colorado.
All right, so how did you end up in Fort Collins, Colorado?
Yeah. And doing this kind of work, I think I've actually got some deeper roots in Fort Collins. I'm an Army brat, so moved around a lot as a kid, but this is actually where my dad chose to retire to. And so it's where I went to high school, college, and that's really where the story started. I wanted to be a historian since I was a kid, and thought I was going to be a history teacher. I was really angling towards that high school history teacher career. And I got about halfway through the track in Colorado at Colorado State and just had one of those quarter life crises where I was like, I can't do this. And decided that, I think maybe there's something else. There's got to be something else I can do. And I lucked out at that point that that CSU was offering a public history course, and so I joined that and just got hooked on the idea of public history, and in particular historic preservation. The idea that history happens in places and that we ought to preserve some of those places and keep that connection there. So I actually applied for graduate school after I finished that. Ended up going to Colorado State again. Specializing in historic preservation. And of course, after graduate school, did what a lot of folks do and toured around the country for whoever would pay me to do this work.
Boy, I just volunteered to be interviewed.
And and I ended up going, I worked at the Olmsted Center for Landscape Preservation. That's a Park Service office in Boston. I was a park ranger at Shenandoah National Park and Pipe Spring National Monument. Got my first full-time gig at the city of Aurora, Colorado, which is east of Denver, as their historic preservation specialist. And spent about 5 years with the state of Nevada in their state historic preservation office. I was running their local government programs as well as their National Register and State Register programs, so identifying places worthy of preservation. And then finally, about a year and a half ago, I get what I've considered my adopted hometown of Fort Collins was expanding their historic preservation team. We've got 3 people here. And so I applied for that job, got it, and I've been back in Fort Collins doing historic preservation work ever since.
That's a lot of moving around.
Yes.
I've had one job. Finishing graduate school, I've had one. And it's like,
come on, man, get on.
I know. So tell me a little bit about the nature of your work. What does it mean to be doing preservation work in Fort Collins?
Yeah, so the principle behind historic preservation is that we're not only identifying the places where history happened, but we're trying to preserve them. The vast majority of historic sites are privately owned. So most of the work we do is, doing the historic survey work, so getting out and either identifying historic places or at least managing consultants who are doing that work for us. So we do a lot of grants application and grants management to support that work in particular. The bulk of our work actually makes us feel a little bit more like part architect, part building contractor, because we're reviewing projects. We're spending a lot of time with how people are choosing to change these historic buildings, and we're trying to make sure that change doesn't disrupt the history. So we're reviewing building permits, we're reviewing development projects, we're landmarks preservation commissions. We do a lot of commission support for one of our city commissions. And then we're trying to beef up how much public education. So we do a lot of at least last year online public education program. Some of our nonprofit partners, a lot of static material on our website. And then the hope is to start expanding that into the future. Once we can do stuff in person again, we'll really ramp up what we're doing to teach people how to care for historic places, but also just give them a glimpse into Fort Collins history.
Before I ask you the next question, I'm going to remind everybody to please put the mute button on. Click that button. Just go down to the bottom corner and just go click, click. There you go. Thank you so much. Awesome. Thumbs up to everybody. All right, next question. What do you enjoy most about this work?
And this is going to be a common theme for public historians. It's just the diversity of the work. I think most public historians I know of, especially that work in the government sector, have just a diversity of a workday. And so I can start my morning working in a GIS mapping application and updating our historic survey records. I can spend the early afternoon doing a public education program for a local nonprofit. And then I can spend the evening supporting our preservation commission while they make design review decisions for historic buildings and historic landscapes. So it's just, there's no end to the diversity of work that you're covering. And so it's a little overwhelming sometimes, but it's also just really hard to get bored because there's so many bases to cover.
All right. So the flip side, what are those challenges that you face on your day to day?
Yeah, and that's I think, unique to historic preservation is you're actually part of the zoning arm of local government, especially when you work at the local level. And so you actually have a role to play in what people do on their private property. That creates some conflicts as people maybe develop projects they're not sensitive to historic buildings. So the worst part is dealing with that conflict and trying to work with owners who maybe just don't care about the historic status. Maybe they bought it but didn't know what it meant and don't care. And so that can be really frustrating, really puts your conflict resolution skills to the test, and can be fairly stressful. But I think in my case, you usually have a team of people that you're working with that can support you. And we're lucky to have a good commission that can kind of create more of a community conversation instead of just being that sole defender of historic places.
And finally, last question, kinda, it's never my last question. What keeps you motivated in this job?
For me, to riff a little bit off Jesse's answer on that, a lot of it comes back to helping people. I really love to help people, in particular, connect with history in a personal way. And I think we've had a couple of projects that have really helped people do that, where it's not just interesting information or things that help them build a perspective about their community, but that really help them see themselves in their community and see themselves in the history around them in a way that also encourages them to participate and make their own history, actually participate in their community and start doing things, hopefully, that we'll be talking about and documenting as important history, 30, 40, 50 years down the road. So in those moments when people are able to make that connection through the work that we're doing, those are just the most powerful moments where I remind myself that that's why I'm in this work, and it keeps me going, even when it can get a little stressful in other cases. So yeah, so that's a big part of it.
There you go. And of course, my secret supplementary question to you is, as somebody who works in historical preservation, is there anything that public history programs, in case we may have a few educators in our call, is there anything that they should be telling? Is there any part of the public history programs that should be enhanced to better prepare people for work like yours?
Yeah, I think a lot of programs do this reasonably well. For public history programs that channel their graduates into preservation in particular, I'd say the big one is teaching students how to look at, analyze, and write history about the built environment. So architectural history in particular. That's the special skill that I think historians can bring to the preservation field, as well as the skills they're going to need to have to even open that door for their careers. So if you don't have a strong architectural history arm to your public history program and you want your graduates to go into preservation, I'd say build that up and get an architectural historian on your faculty.
There you go. That's some sage advice. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
All right. So I know there's at least one person who volunteered to speak to us because she piped up in the middle of Jim's talk. But I will turn to Rebecca and Jesse, who have been following the chats because I can't, I'm not that adept. Is there anybody on that list there who has volunteered to be grilled with my oh so challenging questions?
Yes, we have Laura Starr. And everyone, please join us. You don't have to be a government historian to participate. And we need some people after Laura. So let me know if you want to participate in the chat, either in Zoom or in FeedLoop.
All right. Laura, you have turned your camera on and your mic on. Power to you. So first question to you, who are you?
So I'm Laura Starr. I was that voice that piped up and totally embarrassed myself because I was expressing my anxiety to my husband who's in my home office with me. And anyway, you all got to hear it. So I am probably very pink with embarrassment. But I'm actually, I am a consultant, an archivist, a historian with the firm History Associates. And we work with a lot of federal agencies, and actually I recognize a lot of folks' names here who I've worked with before. So I have that that technical background in archives and history and find different ways to provide services and hopefully solve some challenges of folks both in the federal government, local government, and commercial industry.
Cool. All right. So how did you end up there?
Great question. So I did go to graduate school, University of Maryland, did a dual history and archives master's program. Landed a very brief stint right out of graduate school with a documentary editing project with the Papers of Abraham Lincoln, which is an amazing project out of the University of Illinois to capture all of the writings of Lincoln, all of his signatures. Based out of the Library of Congress, that's where I was working, but I was doing rotating, cropping, and saving of digital images. So I could only take that for about 10 months. You know, we all have that trial by fire or have to cut our teeth on certain things. And so I kind of kept my eyes open and saw a position opening with History Associates. So this is back in 2010. I've been with HAI for just coming up on 11 years now. And so I saw this job opening that was very specific to a map preservation project on a contract we had with the Library of Congress at the time, as well as a photograph cataloging project at Harper's Ferry Center, one of the National Park Service centers. So I was like, hey, why not? I applied for that. You know, at that point in my time, I thought that I really wanted to do a lot of like the hands-on archives work. That's not so much what I do anymore, but I'm sure we'll talk about that in some follow-on questions. But basically, you know, started working on those really hands-on projects, like I say, with federal clients, and then became a project manager on a large project we had with the Park Service, and then have just kind of grown and changed from there. So I have probably worked on more than 350 projects over the course of that 11 years. You know, and when I say projects, it's kind of like individual clients, right? Sometimes it's multiple projects. So I literally, you know, Jesse and I were actually chatting directly because I said to Jesse, I said, gosh, in your job, you sound like a consultant. It sounds like you do something different every single day. And I know so many of us that are in the virtual room today, that's what we do, right? We have our areas of expertise, whether it's, you know, certain areas of history or whatever it might be, but then we also have to be really nimble and be able to wear so many different hats in order to solve those challenges that we're faced with every day. So anyway, that's a long answer, but it's been it's like, you know, I've worked for the same firm for 11 years, but it's like every week, every day is completely different.
Yeah. So you've kind of touched on this a little bit. What's the nature of that work then? What's your current day-to-day?
Yeah, so my current day-to-day is actually working with folks. So I use the term folks because our client set's very broad. Oftentimes I'm working, I basically do the initial planning with prospective clients. So folks who haven't even signed on as a client of History Associates yet, but who have a challenge, who have a problem they're trying to solve. And so they'll reach out to us, or sometimes we're being, you know, proactive and kind of getting our name out there and making it known that we're somebody that can help with different archives and historical challenges. And so basically having like initial solutioning meetings to try and figure out what a project plan might look like, what the resources are that are required to do that. I work really, really closely with my other colleagues in the firm to define level of effort, budgets, whether, you know, that's in-house resources that are being used for our client teams or external people from HAI, digitization budgets, equipment, all of that kind of thing. So putting together really the initial proposal that then our clients, and sometimes also having the, you know, kind of sitting side by side with our prospective clients when they're in their leadership meetings, sharing what our plan is to try and get that buy-in. So really socializing the project with leadership to increase the likelihood that it'll actually get supported and that the money will come in to make it happen and provide those solutions to the challenges.
So obviously working on 300 odd projects over 11 years means you kind of enjoy it. So what is it about this work that keeps you going? What keeps you, what do you enjoy most about all of this?
Yeah, so for me, it's all the different people that I get to meet. So even though, you heard me express that anxiety about speaking, turning my camera on and speaking, I'm like anxious in advance about that. But once I start to talk to people, I love it. Like just that engagement. That's why, I realized pretty quickly that like sitting in a back processing room, processing archival collections and cataloging those collections, that was not for me. That's really important, vital work. But it takes a certain level, it takes a certain skill set, it takes a certain patience, and I don't have that patience. So I think just kind of meeting people, talking about new projects, like I say, basically every day, it's that variety that keeps me really engaged. And even though it can be really tiring sometimes, ultimately when I'm working with somebody and we develop this plan and we're working side by side to develop that, and then it gets approved and we can actually move forward and bring those dreams and goals to fruition. I mean, it's an amazing feeling. So I'm really, really appreciate that opportunity to work with so many different folks to really provide those services and just make it happen.
So it's obviously not all roses and buttercups. What are those challenges that you face?
So it's like the flip side of what I just talked about, right? Oftentimes the challenges are most closely connected to what we love most. It's just trying to balance all of those different clients and projects kind of all on the same level, right? It's like, I definitely fill my plate up too much sometimes, as I think we all do. I'm very lucky because I have great supportive colleagues. So whenever I need help, they're there to kind of to help me out. But it is, and sometimes I would also say that, in this sort of consultancy role, sometimes it's really difficult because it's like when the project is over, the project's over and you move on. Mm-hmm. Right. So kind of having that continuity. I think that's where I am very lucky, though, to be a part of our firm so that even when a project is over, we're still all there working side by side on different projects, but at least we all have that kind of shared culture so that we have each other within the firm and then also all of our different projects and clients. So, it is definitely time management is the hardest thing. And just kind of switching gears all the time.
Yeah, that's a very common, seems to be a very common refrain today. So what keeps you motivated and all that? You've kind of touched on that, but like if you were to grind it down to like a nugget there, what would that be?
Yeah, I mean, it just comes down to ultimately fulfilling the missions of why we're all here, or those passions for why we're all here, right? Is delivering kind of these services, our historical services, our archival services, engagement services, public history services, right? Bringing people, I keep using people and folks, bringing people in the world to the love and joy and passion for history that we all have. They may not realize that they have it either, but being able to in some way instill a little bit of historical engagement in sort of everyone, the average person's life, that is what, that's what drives me. I mean, I work for a for-profit consulting firm, but ultimately I feel like, it's that service component, the public service component that keeps me going and just reminds me why I'm juggling so many things and working on so many things is in order to provide that engagement and to be able to share stories too that have never been shared or have never been uncovered before and being able to bring those to light as well.
Excellent. Thanks so much. Thanks for jumping in and volunteering and announcing it to us all.
No problem. Oh, and one plug, I'm on the consultants committee and we're having our virtual speakeasy tonight at 7:30. So it'll be a chance to do some more networking and learning. So hope to see you guys there.
Sounds good. We definitely encourage everybody to go to everywhere. It's the great thing about this virtual setup. You can go everywhere. Rebecca, Jesse, do we have any other volunteers?
We do. Next up is Sarah Jones. She has a cool background, so I can't wait to hear from her.
Sarah, are you there? I think that's
Hi,
your camera
everybody.
on. Hi. All right,
Yep.
Sarah.
Hi.
First question. Who are you?
Okay. My name is Dr. Sarah Jones. I'm with the Missouri State Museum. Missouri is a Midwestern state in the middle of the country. And I'm located in Jefferson City, the state capital. We're one of the few state museums that is actually located in our state capitol building. We have a law that was passed in 1919 that placed a museum in our state capitol. And so we've been here for over 100 years. In the 1970s, the state parks took over the running of the state museum. And so we've been part of the state parks, division of state parks ever since. And so I actually work for the state parks. So I'm a historian who works for the government, but I don't necessarily do the history of our government. So we have exhibition space on the first floor of the state capitol, and also a big part of our job, I'm one of the interpretive staff. And so we do educational programs, but one of the biggest parts of our jobs is we lead the tours of the state capitol.
There you go. So how do you end up there? It's a kind of unique job by the sounds of it.
It is. It's a mishmash of lots of different kind of history things. So I'm an art historian by training. So I'm a native Missourian. I grew up in Missouri. My PhD is from the University of Missouri. But I did my undergraduate work at the University of Nebraska at Kearney, which is in central Nebraska, another Midwestern state. And while I was there, I worked at a historic house museum and kind of fell in love with museum work and local history. So that's kind of where my love of giving tours actually started. And so I've been giving tours of historic sites for about 15 years now. And so I love the intimate kind of one-on-one engagement that you get with the tour group, and being able to do that in a historic place. The direct engagement you get with public history and walking in the same halls as historic characters. It's a real tactile sense of history that you can impart to somebody on a daily basis is part of the reason why I like to give tours. So that's how kind of I've ended up here at the state capitol. So
you've kind of gone into this question already, which is what's the nature of the work. So is there anything else that you want to add to what the day-to-day kind of looks like?
So it's a lot of giving tours. I also happen to be and we each wear a couple of different hats here. So along with the tour program and doing interpretive educational programs, of course, in the year of COVID, we've been doing a lot of virtual programming. So we've all become video producers and writers around here, done a lot of Facebook video posts on lots of different topics. Because I'm the staff art historian, I do a lot of work on the artwork in our Capitol building. Our current Capitol building was built and opened in 1917, and because of the way they raised the funds to build the building, they ended up with an extra $1 million, and they invested that money in hiring very internationally known artists to come and make paintings for our building. And so there's a bunch of artwork in our building that I get to study all the time. And then in 1936, they hired Thomas Hart Benton, who's the most famous 20th century American artist from the state of Missouri, to come and make a mural, which Benton himself called his masterpiece. So it's a very large, very complicated mural that I get to study and share with people all the time. So that's where my art history background comes in. I'm the only art historian on staff, so I get to spend a lot of time working on that and training the rest of our staff to share that art history with other people too. So
what do you enjoy most about this kind of work?
It's talking to people about it. Getting to like point out little details in the art that other people might not have seen. Today it was a special day. I actually got to give a tour to our the first lady of our state and her guests. And so it was a very uncommon occurrence. And so getting to show her and tell her some like secret little inside stories about the Thomas Hart Benton mural was kind of the highlight of the week. So, but I also like running the museum store, which is I get to put on a completely different hat and go shopping and like figure out what our visitors want to buy in the museum store. And it's our state's bicentennial, so I've spent a lot of time like figuring out how the and you know what people might want to buy, and I get to design stuff. The T-shirt that you see hanging behind me, I designed that. And so like, you know, getting to put on like a bunch of different hats is, it's when you work in a museum, you get to do some other things that you know aren't history related, that are sometimes just super fun.
There you go. So what are some of the challenges that you face?
Well, I mean, it's a political building. So there's lots of politicians in the building. So sometimes we have to keep our personal lives to ourselves, personal opinions to ourselves. So that can be tough sometimes. But also, it also can be fun. There's lots of public rallies and things like that happen in the building, so it can be really dramatic some days. Never a boring day in the Capitol building, that's for sure. Public building, we work with the public, so you know there's the public part of that, so that can also be fun and challenging. Let's see. Oh, and we don't really, so the museum is housed inside the Capitol, but the Capitol building itself is run by the Office of Administration. So there's like the politics of the government, like who controls the building. So there can be some kind of things there that we have to like work out sometimes. That can be challenging too.
Yeah. I'm a former tour guide from the National Legislative Building in Canada, the Parliament buildings, and a lot of those stories seem familiar to me. So what's that thing that keeps you motivated going through all of these political shenanigans? Let's call it that.
I think the people I work with, we have there's folks, we have our staff kind of run the gamut. So we have a few full-timers and a lot of part-time tour guides. The tour I gave this afternoon to the First Lady, I took along our longest tenured tour guide with me. He is in his early 90s, and he's been with state parks for like 20 years since he retired, and he's been here at the Capitol the whole time. So he's done a lot of he did some archival work, but then he's been a tour guide for about 15 years, and he loves it, and he will tell you the minutia of everything. His favorite story is the Missourian who was president for a day because Zachary Taylor didn't want to get inaugurated on a Sunday. So they had to make this guy president for a day because of that. And so these tiny little stories of history of our state that Henry loves to tell. So I just love hanging out with those people. So that's what motivates me. That's what gets me through the day. When we have 100,000 fourth graders who come and see us every year on a regular year, that's what gets me through the day, is hanging out with Henry and the rest of our gang.
Yeah, there's a special pain in bringing small children through legislative buildings and trying to get them to understand that this is in Canada. We talk about the crown everywhere, and everybody's like, "Where's the Queen?" They want to see the Queen. And it's like, no, there's no Queen in this castle.
Yeah, they all want to see they all want to see the president here. Yeah. So it's the same thing.
True enough. Thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thanks.
So I see by the clock down here that it is we have a grand total of 6 minutes left. So I don't know, Rebecca, if there's anybody else who's wants to go and do a lightning round.
We do, actually. We have Susan Ferentinos, who can do a true 6 questions in 6 minutes.
There you go. Susan, you'll need to turn on your camera so we can see you.
Camera is on.
There you go. There you are. Hi, Susan. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you.
All right. First question. You have 6 minutes. Who are you?
I am Susan Ferentinos, and I work as an independent consultant. I have my own one-person business, and I do a range of historical projects as well as editing and indexing as a way to diversify my income.
So how did you end up there?
Well, I started my business just about 10 years ago, a little less than 10 years ago. And before that, I have my PhD in history from an academic program. I also have my master's in library science. So I originally came to public history through archives and special collections. Most recently, before starting my own business, although that was 10 years ago now, I worked for the Organization of American Historians as their public history manager, which was advocating for the needs of public historians within the larger professional organization and overseeing the OAH's cooperative agreement with the National Park Service, which is how I learned how to be a contractor and what types of work there were to do as a contractor.
So as a contractor, what's the nature of that work? What are you actually doing?
I do a lot of different things. I would say that the bulk, I describe myself as a public history researcher, writer, and consultant. I would say the bulk of my day-to-day is doing research for hire. So that's not always, but often book length projects like administrative histories or historic resource studies for the Park Service or other government entities. I also do building documentation, National Register nominations, or right now I'm working on a couple national historic landmarks. And the consulting end of it has to do primarily with women's history and LGBTQ history, which are my areas of expertise within the history scholarship. And so I do some consulting with public history organizations about how to broaden their stories that they're telling in those areas.
Cool. So what do you enjoy most about this kind of work?
I really like writing, which I'm a little surprised about, to be honest, but I do a lot more writing now than I did in any of my previous jobs. And I find I really like it. And the element of writing in particular is kind of bringing order to chaos. And another aspect of the projects that I do, they often involve project management. And that is what I like about in that respect too. And I guess you could say that about archives too.
So on the flip side, what are those challenges that you face?
Well, to be completely honest, as like a self-employed person, health insurance, self-employed person in the United States, health insurance is a big challenge, although I know that's a little beside the point, but for people that are considering this type of work, it's a big issue. And then, more content related, it's just a matter of, in order to actually be economically sustainable, I'm working on multiple projects at any given time. I have like 11 different kind of long-term projects that I'm working on right now, for instance, and sometimes that can get a little crazy, just hopping from, Spanish colonialism to 19th century same-sex desire to 20th century women's history in the course of a day. It can sometimes be a little jarring.
Yeah, a little schizophrenic. So what keeps you motivated with all of these challenges?
Well, since a lot of my work relates to LGBTQ history, that is, I'm very motivated to do that type of work. I identify as queer, and that's an area of history that a lot of people know little about. And so that's very rewarding to help build that bridge and share information with people. And then just in a more general sense, I very much like the practicality of my job. Like, people have questions, they hire me, we figure out the answers, you know, and I find that very rewarding too.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing your perspective, Susan. And we are unfortunately out of time. I suspect that we could probably do this, keep going and doing more, for which I will offer to anybody who wants to either redo their session or have their own one-on-one so that I can post it on YouTube. If you want to have your own 6 minutes and 6 question sessions, all you need to do is go through the NCPH portal, and you can actually message me directly and we will set something up. I want to thank everyone who took the time to come to listen to us. Thank you for everyone who put up with my 6 ridiculous questions. I hope you all enjoy the rest of the NCPH annual meeting this year. I also want to put one more plug for the Government Historians Committee. If you are interested in joining our committee, please let us know. We have some spots opening up. Also, don't forget to check out the tags in the program. It will tell you which of those sessions are sponsored by the Government Historians Committee. Thank you so much, everybody. Enjoy yourselves. Have a great day and enjoy the rest of the week.